The wind howled through the cracked sidewalks of the city, biting at every exposed inch of skin. 13-year-old Ella stood on a street corner, her fingers red and raw as she passed out flyers for a local diner. Her shoes were too tight, the soles worn nearly to holes, and her coat, 3 sizes too big and patched with fabric scraps, barely held off the cold. But despite everything, she wore a soft smile, the kind that made strangers look twice. Life hadn't been easy, but Ella had learned to find warmth in moments, not things. Just as she handed out the last flyer, she noticed something strange at the far end of the block. A little boy, maybe 6, sat curled up near the bus stop bench, arms hugging his knees, his face pale and frightened. He wasn't dressed for the weather, no jacket, no shoes, not even socks. People passed him by, casting quick, uncomfortable glances, but no one stopped. Ella hesitated for only a moment before walking over. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked gently. The boy looked up with wide, teary eyes and shook his head. "I can't find my dad. We were at the mall, then he was gone." Her heart squeezed. She knew what it was like to be scared. To feel invisible. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about the cold biting through her sleeves or how late it was getting. She just knew one thing, this boy needed someone, and she was going to be that someone. Ella knelt beside the boy, her own legs trembling from the cold. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Noah," he whispered, his lips already turning blue. He clutched his small arms around himself, trying to stay warm, but his teeth chattered uncontrollably. Ella looked around, still, no one was stopping. Cars drove by. People hurried past. Everyone had somewhere to be. But time seemed to slow for her. She glanced down at her own coat. It wasn't much, old, faded, with one broken zipper and a sleeve sewn back on, but it was the only thing standing between her and the biting wind. Still, without thinking twice, she unzipped it and slid it off. "Here," she said, wrapping it gently around Noah's tiny shoulders. "You need it more than I do." Noah looked up, confused. "But, what about you?" "I'm tough," she said with a smile, though her arms instantly prickled with cold. "You just hold tight. Someone's going to come looking for you." Ella sat down beside him, wrapping one arm around his shoulders and using her own body as a barrier against the wind. They didn't talk much, just sat there, two strangers, finding warmth in shared silence. She didn't care if her mom would be upset that she gave away her only coat. She didn't care that her fingers had gone numb. All she knew was that a little boy was alone, afraid, and freezing, and she couldn't walk away from that. Not now. Not ever. They sat together for what felt like forever, the cold deepening with every passing minute. Ella's hands were stiff, her lips dry and cracked, but she refused to move. She kept glancing down at Noah, who had finally stopped shaking under her coat and was leaning against her, eyes heavy with sleep. Just as she began to wonder what to do next, the screech of tires cut through the stillness. A black SUV pulled up in front of the bus stop, its door flying open before it even came to a full stop. A tall man in a sharp suit jumped out, eyes wide with panic. "Noah," he cried. The boy jolted up. "Daddy!" The man ran to them and scooped Noah into his arms, holding him tight like he never wanted to let go. Ella stood awkwardly, unsure if she should say something or just quietly slip away. She took a step back. Then the man turned to her, his eyes landing on the coat wrapped around his son. Did you stay with him?" Ella nodded, shivering. "He was cold. I gave him my coat." The man blinked, visibly shaken. He looked at the coat again, oversized and frayed, clearly not meant for the little boy, and then at Ella's trembling arms. Something changed in his face. The panic softened into something else. Gratitude. Awe. He knelt down, still holding Noah, and said, "You didn't leave him. You gave him your only coat." She nodded again, barely able to speak through the cold. The man stood slowly, still holding Noah close, but now his eyes were fixed on Ella, not with pity, but with a kind of reverence. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and spoke quietly into it. "I've found him. He's safe." Then he looked back at her. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Ella," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ella," he repeated, like he wanted to remember it forever. "I'm Richard Lane." She froze. That name, Lane, she'd seen it on buildings, delivery trucks, even the hospital where her mother had once taken her. Richard Lane wasn't just some dad. He was that Richard Lane, the billionaire entrepreneur, the kind of man who appeared on news headlines and Forbes covers. She blinked in disbelief. "You're the Lane." He gave a humble nod. "And that's my son. You didn't just keep him warm. You kept him safe. Do you realize what you did?" Ella looked down, unsure. "I just didn't want him to be cold. That's all." Richard stared at her like she was the most incredible person he'd ever met. "You gave up the only coat you had, sat with a stranger's child in freezing weather, and didn't ask for a thing." She shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. He needed help. In that moment, Richard realized something money couldn't buy: true kindness. A girl who had nothing, yet gave everything. And it hit him: she didn't save just his son, she reminded him of humanity. 1 week later, Ella and her mother stood nervously in the lobby of a grand restaurant downtown, a place they'd only ever seen from the outside, through foggy bus windows. Her mom wore her best thrift store dress, and Ella had borrowed a cardigan from their neighbor. She felt out of place, but tried to stand tall. Then, the same black SUV pulled up, and out stepped Richard Lane, dressed in a soft sweater this time, not a business suit. Noah ran beside him, grinning as he spotted Ella. "That's her, Daddy. That's Ella." Richard greeted them warmly and guided them inside, past glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors. At their table, he handed Ella a large box wrapped in silver paper. She opened it slowly, and gasped. Inside was a beautiful, brand-new coat. Deep blue, soft as a cloud, stitched with her name on the inside collar: Ella, always warm, always brave. But that wasn't all. "I wanted to do more," Richard said, his voice full of emotion. "So, I've started a scholarship in your name, for children who show extraordinary kindness. And if you'll let me, I'd like to help you and your mom too. School, housing, whatever you need." Ella looked up at him, stunned. Her mother was already in tears. "I didn't do it to get anything," Ella said quietly. "I know," he replied, smiling. "That's why it means everything." And in that moment, Ella understood: one small act of love could ripple out and change more than a life, it could change hearts.